We've talked about fitness influencers taking small doses of Anavar. We've also talked about the primo Amazonian woman. We've talked about bodybuilders falling short in their competitions after honestly risking their entire femininity for it. But what we haven't discussed is what happens when you reach the top of the game. When you've dominated your competition, won the accolades, been recognized, and basically cemented in history for the rest of your life. Who do you become when the stage lights go out? Take Jay Cutler, for example. This man has remained a household name for decades, for years, and he's been able to do so even after he stepped off the stage and retired. In fact, what's interesting here is the woman we're going to talk today about a bit, at least, is Iris Kyle. Jay Cutler has 1,757% more interactions on his account than Iris Kyle does. He's built multiple businesses. He's kept his stature as a fitness influencer, even being sponsored by basically what is seen to be younger demographic companies. But what happens when you win even more than Jay Cutler and you're done with the competing? When you literally take home double the amount of Olympia titles. Here comes Iris Kyle because she has 10 Mr. Olympia or Mrs. Olympia titles. So you think that she would be living a good life, maintaining her looks and representing bodybuilding in the best way possible, right? That's not quite the case. And before I dive in, let me just make this extremely clear. This is not bullying. This is a case study of the long-term effects of exposure to steroids. It's a case study of the extremes that women push themselves to in the highest levels of bodybuilding to achieve some serious metal. It is a case study of what happens when women push their limits with androgens or male hormones. Now, back in Iris Kyle's peak, she was winning shows over and over again. She looked extremely big. Obviously, her face slightly masculinized because of the obvious steroid abuse. However, as we discussed, it kind of comes with the territory. At a certain point, you do have to accept that there's going to be side effects when you chase this route. If you want to get to the highest level of bodybuilding, well, you simply can't just do that sitting back on your couch. You're going to need to, well, expose yourself to some steroids. We have seen it with Ilona, a female we recently talked about, that was taking above 200 milligrams of androgens a week to in a smaller category than women's bodybuilding, the one that Iris Kyle competes in. In other words, she was using almost double the amount of male TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, in total androgens. This results in some changes, of course, but it might be acceptable for a female whose dream is bodybuilding. And by far, this is the most interesting social oddity that we have in bodybuilding, in my opinion. So if we can just do a bit of a thought experiment for a second. Iris Kyle has won the Mrs. Olympia title 10 times consecutively, the highest achievement in female bodybuilding. Ilona has won absolutely zero competitions in the pro rank. In fact, she hasn't even achieved a pro card yet. She's not allowed to even compete with professional bodybuilders. So let's just work this out. If Iris Kyle, who's won 10 of the largest titles in bodybuilding for females, consecutively, mind you, if she's done this, and we have another competitor who's won absolutely zero titles and hasn't even qualified as a professional bodybuilder yet, but it's taking pretty hefty doses, again, 2 times the amount of what could be male TRT, what is Iris Kyle doing? Of course, you could imagine she's been exposed to quite a bit of androgens, steroids. Not just that, of course, you could say that, and it's all fine and dandy, and a lot of people use steroids, but it's the fact of the matter that she was competing for over almost 20 years. This woman has been exposed to steroids for almost 20 years, male hormones. This is longer than most transgender affirming therapies have been going on for in the United States. Meaning, when we've actually studied female to male transitions with hormones, she's been already doing this same thing for years. So it is more than a very interesting experiment to see happen. And I'm going to explain a lot of these terms and make them a little bit more familiar to you. Of course, a lot of you already know what these terms are, hopefully from having watched my previous videos. But I do want to show you Iris Kyle now. You can see that her hairline has receded quite a bit. Her jawline and much else is certainly enlarged compared to normal female physiology, as well as you can see there are some of the same disproportionate cheekbones that we have seen in other few females. Now, again, I'm not pointing these out to laugh at somebody or anything like this. It's her choice. I respect it. She's made a living and honestly a really respectable lifestyle from it. However, I do think it is clearly important to point these things out and show what's happening here at a pharmaceutical level and as well a physiological level. Because most women using performance enhancing drugs don't consider these things. They don't consider what happens to a girl like Iris Kyle after years of competing. They just think that they're taking something in a short term to get a short term result. But as they open that door and they see the results that can be had with a simple pill, it starts opening up quite wide. So my goal here is to discuss the long-term effects of something like this, because she is without a doubt one of of the women in this sport who has been exposed to steroids for the longest amount of time. So another one of those effects is Iris's voice.
My first Olympia, I placed fourth, which is a very, very accomplishment as well. I think my journey advanced pretty fast and did well. I was really passionate. I pretty much put everything on the side, from relationships, family. I isolated. I cut everything off to follow my dream, because bodybuilding was something that it was a fix for me, and it made me happy, and that's all I lived for.
While you can still hear some of the feminine tones within her voice, it's very clear it's not a normal voice. It's almost entirely lost its natural pitch and tones, and you can clearly say there's something wrong there. Now, this is due to a lot of those androgens being used, what I would assume to be some testosterone, some Anavar, some Primable, and some of these various different synthetic steroids being used, activating the androgen receptor sites located in the larynx and vocal folds, causing edema and growth there, actually hypertrophying those folds, creating a deeper voice and more raspy voice. But I want to throw a wrench in the thought of being exposed to steroids causing absolute issues, because there was a Miss Olympia runner-up in 2005, and her name was Yaxine Orliquin, I think. If you don't know, I'm historically awful at pronouncing names. It's almost hysterical how much I can't pronounce names.
Jay Quellen. Where's Jay Quellen at?
Do you mean Jacqueline?
Yaxine was born on September 3rd, 1966 in Cambias, Zulia, Venezuela, the youngest of 9 children, 4 brothers and 4 sisters. She started bodybuilding before I was even born, 1989. Competed for the total of 15 years, with each of those years doing a competition consecutively. Now, when she competed at the Olympia, she placed second to Iris Kyle. But what I think is more interesting is that she's actually retired from bodybuilding now. And it's clear that scrolling through Instagram, she still reminisces about competing in bodybuilding quite often. It's clearly something she truly loved and enjoyed the pursuit of. But what's also really clear is she hasn't really changed physically to the degree of what other women we've talked about have changed. She looks quite good for her age at 60 years old. In fact, I would argue she looks pretty healthy. And even while she is actively competing, she doesn't really express any of the features we've been talking about on this channel. This is extremely interesting for me. Even her voice isn't that drastically changed. It might be a little deeper, but if you listen to it honestly and ask yourself, is this a deep voice? Well, I don't know, you tell me.
Ya tengo 52 años, hice casi 30 años de mi carrera. Hice más de 40 competencias, me retiré en el 2017, que tuve la oportunidad de estar en primer lugar en el mundo como única latina.
Which begs the question, what is the top female bodybuilder in the world for 10 consecutive years taking compared to the runner-up? And this grew some massive curiosity within me, and I started to look at all of the runner-up Miss Olympias in the past several years. And I found this actually reoccurring quite a bit. You have Juliette Berman, who lives her life what looks like to be Thailand, somewhere I'm very familiar with, as I lived there for almost 2 years, enjoying things, but overall looking quite normal. Then you also have Diana Kadur. She's Canadian, so it must be French or something. She also placed second to Iris many years. During her competing years, she didn't look too masculine, and even now, as she stands, years of bodybuilding didn't take that much of a toll on a woman who's almost 60 years old. And while she wears a waist trainer, she doesn't really look outside visually of the norm in her age bracket. Then you also have Catherine, another Canadian bodybuilder similar to Diana. She started competing around the same time frame, except she has done 40 plus shows in her time as a female bodybuilder, with her last one being in 2016. Her first one was exactly in 1990. So that means that she's been competitively bodybuilding for over 20 years. During an interview on JTV, she talks about how she built herself a home gym and a lifestyle around bodybuilding even though she's retired. And when you listen to this video, it clearly sounds like she has some vocal changes, nothing too drastic, but they're definitely there.
You go to grocery and somebody asks you, oh, are you a personal trainer? I get like all insulted, you know, like what? Like, just no, I don't like to talk about it. I just never like it. To me, it's like, you know, like people ask you like, oh, I want to buy my pro card so bad. I want to be IFBB pro. And I was just like, what for? And I'm like, why? I don't get it. I never get it. Anyway, when I turned pro, I didn't know I turned pro. Somebody said, hey, you turned pro. I'm like, really?
Really?
what I mean.
You might even add that she had some slight bone maturation or bone growth within her face, but it's really not that bad, especially when compared to other women we've discussed on this channel. Not too long ago, for instance, we covered Meg Sylvester, and I am sorry, Meg, I don't ever mean to bully anyone, never meant to bully you, so please don't be upset at me. She changed entirely from her previous self. She started competing as a bikini competitor and then stepped it up to physique or figure or one of the two, and then moved to the biggest category she possibly could, which was, I believe, physique at the time. I don't exactly know the timeline. I went through it pretty in depth in that video and it's worth checking out. But this was over the span of a few years, keep in mind, not decades. And her face looks far more significantly changed than does some of the females that we've just discussed who've been bodybuilding for over 20 years. This is, of course, barring Iris Kyle, who was the best for more years than I can even count on a single hand, which also leads to the thought that maybe she was just the one who was willing to risk a little bit more of herself to achieve those titles. But what I do question is because some of these recent and more modern transformations that we've seen mirror more of an Iris Kyle route as opposed to some of these earlier bodybuilders who have been competing for over 20 plus years. What's the difference? What are they taking that's so different? Let me express this in a better way. Sunny Andrews, a wellness competitor who has a ton of accolades in the sport and also a past of injections within her glutes, who also claims natural, by the way, just to be clear. She is in a far smaller category within bodybuilding, one that basically targets glute and leg development over most other things. But her facial changes in this picture, they are more pronounced than some of the women that we've discussed who have been bodybuilding for 2 decades. And especially when she's dieted down a little bit, you can really see these morphological changes within her jawline and cheekbones. Of course, she looks like she's doing a really great job of taking care of herself, but they're still present. Now, before everyone runs to the comments and the activists get mad at me saying that I'm a ginger who's balding and has bad teeth, you're right. Are you happy? Okay, let's keep going. We can talk about her vocal changes too. Now, this was her voice before, just so you know, less than 3 years ago.
Hey everybody, Sunny Andrews here. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is my very first video and I'm really excited to share a little bit about myself with you guys and let you know what to expect here.
What I'm about to show you is her voice now.
When I wasn't called for 4th or 3rd or even 2nd, I kept thinking that this possibly might be the moment that I had been envisioning for the last 2 years, and it ended up being my day today. And I think that any person that's a pro that has Olympia in their mind envisions the moment when their name is called to get that qualification.
The open bodybuilders we discussed previously didn't even have this degree of vocal changes. We had shown you one that had been competing for over 15 years and didn't sound like they had this much of a distorted voice at all. Again, I can't stress enough, the female here is someone who's competed for almost 20 years and was at one point well over 200 pounds in muscle. And as I look through this, there's definitely a point in her career where things started to turn around in not so good of a way. Like here, she looks very feminine. It's more of a early on in her career type picture, but you can see some slight changes within a jawline compared to a normal female. But when she's 43 and still competing, those changes are much more obvious and very clear to the common eye. So I wonder if this is a time exposure thing or if these females have just met their time limit. The old father time just keeps clicking and they're trying to refuse this stopping. Or maybe if it's the compounds that they're starting to use. Maybe earlier on, 20 plus years ago, the compound selection was a little bit different, and as new and novel drugs came to the surface of bodybuilding and they started to be experimenting with these things more, that's when they started to see more and more changes, which also might be the reason as to why we're seeing younger females who are much less muscular get way more masculinized way earlier on. Because essentially these past few changes that we've discussed in these females took decades, whereas some of the females we've covered have taken years, not just 5 or 10 years, like 2 years, sometimes even 1 year. And it just really lets you know that most women getting into steroids today have zero idea what they're getting into. And of course that makes sense because all we hear online is that, well, the girls in LA take steroids, they take Anavar, and that's why everyone looks so good. So you need to too.
At least one of your favorite influencers is probably taking steroids. The very popular one amongst women is Anavar. It's known as the women's safe drug because you can use smaller amounts and get away with little to no side effects from it. It's less likely to produce male characteristics while still getting the benefit from muscle growth, but you're going to see smaller size and strength gains for more of that very lean look, especially if you're in bigger cities like LA or in New York. Anavar is easy to get your hands on because most people are taking it.
We've seen 19-year-olds on TikTok bragging about their first cycle. And where, you might ask, are they getting their advice from influencers saying shit like this.
Got a lot of questions, comments, and concerns on me taking a SARM and Anavar. From a female's perspective, from my perspective on what my personal goals were on taking the supplement and how it affected me. I'm going to put some pictures here of when I first started and through the Rad 140 cycle and my cycle I'm currently on, which is Anavar. Personally, I did see a lot of strength on the Rad 140. I grew in strength. I didn't have any negative downside to that, the Rad 140, surprisingly, but I have seen more cut definition and my strength has grown more on the Anavar than it did on the SARM.
So now 19-year-old girls are jumping into cycles because they wanted to have the LA look, whatever that is, but no one is showing them the full picture, long-term effects, the real risks. At the end of the day, steroids are of course a choice. If a female wants to take anabolics, that is her choice. I can't stop her, you can't stop her, and our opinions won't do anyone any harm or justice when it comes to stopping them or creating an environment where they can start. But let's be at least a little bit cordial and honest in saying that most women, even if they're educated, aren't experienced, or just simply don't understand what they're getting into, at least enough to make a true educated decision. They're jumping into these things because of social media trends, because they want to look like their favorite competitor, because they want to look like their favorite fitness model, and of course they have pills to do that, but of course the mechanism of those pills action, that doesn't matter. The results do. And the followers, and the sponsorships, and the idolization of a body that is uber unrealistic to a point that is just doesn't even make sense. However, no one at all is showing them the reality. So when I start making videos talking about females who have transformed their bodies, voice, and entire lives because of steroids, it gets people mad because no one tells them that the look they're actively chasing is actually probably going to end up in something that they're never going to be happy with and never going to be satisfied with, and in the end of their days will be absolutely mortified what they've done to themselves. No one is pointing out every Sunny Andrews or Iris Kyles within the industry. And for every girl who's starting her first steroid cycle at 19 years old, there's another one who wishes she never touched any steroids. So the question is, will today's generation of women learn from the generations past and the effects that they've had on their own bodies? Or will they keep making the same mistakes, maybe even worse? What do you think? Tell me in the comments down below. I'll catch you in the next video.